Hey, what's up? It's Dan Perry, and in this video I'm going to show you how to build a retaining wall. I'm going to show you how to go from this to something that looks like this, what you see directly behind me here. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so the first stage in building a retaining wall is to design and plan the wall. And what I have right here is a diagram of the side of the wall if you're going to build a 3-foot retaining wall like I'm going to show you how to do in this video. Okay, now depending on the height of your wall, your design is going to vary a little bit, but this is basically the fundamental elements of most retaining walls. So first off, you have a 6-inch layer of packed gravel base. So that's like a type 2 gravel. And that's the same stuff you'd use underneath like a paver patio to make sure it stays flat. And this is going to be the foundation. This is what's going to keep the blocks in place and keep them from waving around and warping and keep your wall from pushing over. So extremely important. You don't want to skimp here because that's the structure of your wall. So you got a 6-inch gravel base, and then you've got the blocks. And this type of block, it has a little bit of a lip here. And that's the type of block that I recommend. They're really widely available, they're easy to use, and they're pretty cheap. So then behind the blocks you have 6 inches, a 6-inch layer of gravel for drainage. And that's like a 3/4 inch rock, like a rough 3/4 inch rock. And you can go ahead and ask whatever your local rock yard is, wherever you're going to get the gravel base and the drain gravel from, what they recommend for cheap drain gravel for behind a retaining wall. And it's usually going to be about a 3/4 inch like rough rock that you put back there. And that's important because, you know, when it rains and all this dirt kind of soaks up a bunch of moisture, it needs somewhere for that water to go, okay? Because it's already under a tremendous amount of pressure just from the dirt. So we get all that water in there, gives us even more pressure, and then it's going to push our wall over. So we need a place for that water to go. So it can go down through these rocks and out the front of the wall. Now in some cases, you're also going to need a drain pipe down at the bottom here if you have a really tall wall or your paver blocks don't allow for water to go out the front. So basically check with your block supplier and they'll give you recommendations on this. It's a very excellent resource to help you through this project, so make sure to utilize that. And then up here at the top we have our topsoil actually covering over our gravel right there, so we can plant grass or plants or whatever up on top of that. And then back here, this is all packed dirt. So as you build the wall, you're going to want to pack it down and tamp it down to make sure that it stays in place and it doesn't sink down and your wall doesn't start caving in backwards. You don't want that. And then in the front, you need to cover half of the bottom block. So this is your ground level right here. And that needs to go up to at least half of the bottom block. So this is a 6-inch tall block, and this is a 6-inch paver base. We're going halfway up the block, so we need to dig the hole at least 9 inches deep in order for this wall to be structurally sound so it doesn't move forward. Okay, so wherever the ground level is going to be once you install your wall, you're going to have to dig at least 9 inches deeper than that if you're going with the same system I'm showing you here. Now over here on the right, I have the front view of a wall if you're building a wall up a hill. Okay. Now you might have the question of, well, what do I do if I'm going up a slight grade? Should I just angle the blocks and just go up like at an angle like that? And the answer is definitely no. You need to have a perfectly level block. Okay. That's very important for the structural soundness of the wall. Okay. It needs to be structurally sound. So what you'll do instead is you're just going to step it up. Okay. You can just step it up so you don't have to dig, 4 feet deep over here. You can still just dig down the 9 or 12 inches or wherever you're going and then just step up the bottom as you go and make sure it's just really packed and level, and that's the most important thing. So, alright, so let's talk about a few things you're going to want to consider when you're designing your wall. Okay, so the first thing is going to be the maximum height. Okay, at the tallest point of your wall, how tall is it going to be? And that's important because it's going to determine the design here. It's going to determine what size blocks you're going to use. It's going to determine what kind of drainage you need. It's going to determine the thickness of the base that you need to install. So you're going to want to consider that height. Secondly, you're going to want to consider, again, what kind of blocks you're going to use. There's all kinds of different blocks. These are the ones I like just because they're really simple and they're cheap and they look really good still. And then you also want to consider the dirt, okay? You're going to be moving a lot of dirt. And so you're going to want to think through, where's that dirt going to come from? You know, you're going to have to dig down this 9 inches deep here. You're going to have to do something with that dirt. Where are you going to put it? Are you going to put it back up on the top of the wall? Do you need to bring in more dirt to put up on top of the wall? So you really want to think through that and plan it and kind of eyeball it if you can, or actually do some calculations if you have the time. And really think through that, because last thing you're going to want to do is move more dirt than necessary, okay? And the last thing you want to consider is make sure to check your local codes, so you build your wall to code, because you're not going to want to have to redo this. And lastly, your utilities. Make sure there's no utility lines running under here that you're going to hit when you're digging, and make sure to call before you dig. And once you got it all planned out, you can go ahead and start digging. Now, I'm not going to show you how to dig because that would be boring and you already know how to do that. But here's a quick look at what your trench might look like when it's finished. You want to aim for a really level trench. You want to make sure it's level before you add the gravel base. And this is going to take a lot of work. This is probably the majority of the work, especially if you have rocky soil like I do here. So you're going to want to dig the hole about 20 inches wide. As you can see, I'm a little bit short of that. That's not super necessary according to the research I've done. You really just need enough to where you have a little bit of room behind it, because later on we're going to fill this behind here with gravel so we can drain it. And you also want to be able to work in there while you're putting the pavers in, so you have a little bit of room to maneuver them, so you can get a nice clean radius here, and you're not going to be restricted by the trench that you dug. And once you've dug your trench, the next step is to add the gravel base. And you're going to want to do this in 2-inch layers. Okay, so add about 2 inches, dump consistent piles and then rake it out into about a 2-inch layer, and then tamp each layer really well. You really want to pack it down. And if you need some extra moisture, if it dries out, go ahead and get out a hose and get it slightly damp to help it pack down a little bit better. And once you've built up 6 inches of gravel base, go ahead and level it out really well and then tamp it down one last time to prepare for your first level of blocks. And finally, you can start on the first layer of retaining wall blocks and start actually building your wall. So start at one side and just work your way down one block at a time, leveling each one as you go. So the first layer that you're going to lay down of these pavers, or these retaining wall blocks, is going to be the most time consuming, kind of frustrating because you're bending over, trying to get it perfectly level. And here's a couple quick tips to make it a little easier. First off, you want to make sure your type 2 gravel base is really flat to begin with, so you have a good start to work with from the very beginning. But then, as you're laying the blocks, you'll find that there's just slight modifications or adjustments you're going to want to make. And what you'll do is, maybe you put your level on it and you see it's a little out of level there. So you take your block back up and just take some of this, some sand, and just spread that out wherever you want it to add some or even it out. And this is much easier to work with than trying to make some minor adjustments with the actual type 2 base. And again, this first layer is going to take the most time because you have to level each individual block. The rest of the layers, you can just lay the blocks right on top of the previous block, no worries. But this first one is really important that you get each block level, because you're not going to be able to level it later as you add rows. And once you've leveled all the blocks, you can start adding some gravel. So if you remember from earlier in the video, I mentioned that you're going to want to use a 3/4 inch gravel for drainage to go behind the pavers. So you're going to want to go ahead and add that behind the pavers, and then you're going to want to go ahead and tamp that down I've decided to use a 2x4 just because I had one and my hand tamper was a little bit too big to fit behind the blocks, at least on the first few layers. And then you're also going to want to add some dirt to the front of the blocks and also pack that down as well, just to keep the blocks in place as you build the rest of the wall. And once you finish the first layer, the rest of it, it's all downhill from here. You've hit the easy part, and now it's just a matter of stacking blocks up and then filling in the gravel and the dirt behind the wall. So to start laying each individual layer, just put the blocks starting at one end, one by one, and make sure to stagger the seams, as you can see here in the video. And then again, you're going to want to backfill with the gravel and the dirt after each layer, and then tamp down the gravel and the dirt really well, just to pack that down behind the wall so the wall doesn't sink backwards after over time once it's built, as the dirt settles. And this wall that you see here, this is about a 50-foot long wall, and again, this is about 3 feet tall when it's done. And I really wouldn't recommend this project to do by yourself if you're on a tight timeline. Unless you have a few months to do this and you're going to be breaking up the work, a few hours here, a few hours there, I really wouldn't recommend this. I mean, this project took me basically most of the summer plus some time, and I was just working, a couple hours here, a couple hours there. Otherwise, it would have been there would have been way too much labor, and I would have had to hire some heavy machinery, or I would have had to hire some labor to help me do this project. I would never recommend doing this by yourself on a tight timeline. And the total cost of this project, again, this is a 50-foot wall, about 3 feet tall, and the total cost of this project was just a little over $1,000. Okay, most of that money was in pavers, or the actual retaining wall blocks. That was about $900 of it, and then there was about $150 worth of gravel and the Type 2 base, again, which is really cheap. If you go to your local rock yard, you can even have that delivered. And for the top layer, you're going to want to actually glue it down to hold it in place so somebody doesn't come by and just tear it off the wall, and you got to do a bunch of digging and stuff. So go ahead and glue the top layer, and you can even glue the top 2 layers if you want extra security, or if you're using a smaller block. So here's a quick look at what the wall looks like after the first few rows. You can actually see the gravel and the packed dirt behind it. I've actually tamped that down really well. And then here's what it looks like on the last layer. Okay, I put some topsoil over that gravel so you don't see the gravel. But I actually don't tamp this layer down. I don't want to pack this soil because I'm actually going to be planting stuff here. And that's how you build a retaining wall. And as you can see, this makes a pretty big difference to the landscape. It really improves it and allows you to work with it and gives you more usable space, especially if you have any hills or slopes in your yard. And as you can see from these before and after pictures, it makes quite the transformation. So I hope you've enjoyed this video so far, and I have a couple more bonus tips to share, so don't go anywhere. So at this point, you might be wondering, what if I need to cut a block? And cutting a block is actually pretty easy. I'm going to demonstrate exactly how to do it right here. Now first, you need to grab a mini sledgehammer and a mason's chisel. And what you're going to do is you're just going to draw a line where you want to cut the paver, and then you're just going to go along that line, tapping the chisel, and basically you're going to score the block all the way around, and just keep tapping it and keep working that groove. And eventually, once you've worked your way all the way around it, you can hit it a little bit harder a couple of times, and the block should split right down in a perfect line for you. You might have to chip off a couple of chunks here and there, but that's the easiest way to cut it. Now, obviously, another way to do it would be to get an angle grinder with a diamond blade on it and cut it with that. And that would probably be a little bit faster if you're cutting a lot, but typically you're only going to need to cut a couple of them, so it's really not a big deal. And that's exactly how you do it. All right, so let's go over the tools we're going to need for the project. We're going to need a rake, a spade shovel, a flat nose shovel, a little digging spike here. If you got really rocky soil, you're going to need a pick, again, if you have rocky soil. Then you're going to need this tamper here, a little hand tamper, to pack down the paver base, and you're going to need it through various steps. Then you're also going to need a series of levels. You're going to want a 4-foot level, 2-foot level, and a torpedo level. And we're also going to need a mason's chisel, a mini sledge. I think this is a 5-pound or a 3-pound, a rubber mallet, a caulking gun, and something that's optional but not necessary to help you level and with the grading of the ground. You can get a few stakes, some string, and a line level, and that'll make your job a little bit easier. But that's, like I said, that's optional. If you want, you can also just use the level, the 4-foot level, or even a longer level if you have one. That's all you need. I'm Dan Perry, and thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe below to get more videos just like this one. And if you enjoy DIY projects and you want to learn how to turn your skills into a profitable business, visit handymanstartup.com.